The Velhari Council had not called an emergency session in 400 years. That fact alone told Ambassador Drea Solenne everything she needed to know before she even stepped off the transit pod onto the crystalline docking shelf of Station Aurum. The station hung in the middle of the contested spiral, a stretch of space that 7 civilizations had agreed, in writing, in blood, and in whatever the Thervaki used instead of blood, to leave completely neutral. Drea was human. 34 years old. Former agricultural logistics coordinator from Boise, Idaho. Current United Earth diplomatic liaison, 3rd tier. Which, in practical terms, meant she handled the problems that the 1st and 2nd tier ambassadors found too tedious, too small, or too confusing to deal with personally. She had been promoted to this post 11 months ago because she was, according to her evaluation file, unusually comfortable with ambiguity. She was beginning to hate that phrase. The message that had pulled her from her bunk at 3 a.m. ship time had contained exactly 41 words. Ambassador Solenne. Urgent convening. Station Aurum. Velhari seat. Matter concerns your species. Attendance is not optional. Come without weapons, without fleet escort, and without recording instruments. Come alone. Come now. The part that truly unsettled her was not the urgency. It was the phrase your species. Not your government. Not your delegation. Not Earth's representatives. Your species. Like humanity was a single organism that had done something, one unified, collective, irreversible thing. She pulled her gray diplomatic coat tight, checked that her translation earpiece was seated properly, and walked through the pressure doors into the council chamber. The Velhari did not have faces exactly. They had presence. 7 of them floated in the upper half of the domed room, their membrane wings folded close, their trilobed sensory clusters angled toward her the moment she entered. They communicated in overlapping harmonic pulses, which the earpiece converted into something between speech and feeling. She would hear words, but beneath the words she would also feel the emotional signature that the Velhari embedded in each syllable. Right now, the emotional signature was grief mixed with the specific dread of watching something inevitable begin. Ambassador Solenne, said the one she recognized as First Chord Vathis, their equivalent of a council chair. You are aware of what your people have done? Drea stopped walking. I've been traveling for 18 hours. I've had limited communication access. Tell me what I'm here for. Sit, said Vathis. There was only one chair in the chamber. It had been placed there for her. The Velhari did not sit. They considered sitting a form of surrender to gravity which they philosophically opposed. The fact that they had provided a chair meant they wanted her to feel small. She sat anyway. She crossed her legs. She folded her hands in her lap. Tell me, she said again. Vathis pulsed, grief, dread, and now something new underneath, the sick exhaustion of a person delivering a death notice. 3 weeks ago, said the First Chord, a human survey vessel entered the Keth marginal zone without clearance. They made contact with the Draven. The translation earpiece rendered the name Draven in its original vibrational form, and for just a fraction of a second, every Velhari in the room went completely, utterly still. Drea had been in diplomacy long enough to know what that kind of stillness meant. It meant the word itself was a wound. I don't know that name, she said carefully. No, said Vathis. You would not. We have never spoken it to you. We have never spoken it to any young civilization. It is not a name we say lightly. A long pulse, something that felt through the earpiece, like the moment before a very old scar is touched. The Draven are the reason the contested spiral was designated neutral. The reason 6 civilizations that you have never heard of no longer exist. The reason we, all of us, every species at this table, every species not at this table, agreed 2,000 years ago that there are places in this galaxy that we do not go. Drea felt the hair on her arms rise. The Keth marginal zone, she said. Is their threshold, said Vathis. A boundary they established. A line that every civilization without exception has honored. The First Chord descended slightly, coming closer to Drea's eye level, which she understood was not a gesture of intimacy but of gravity. Until yours. Silence. Drea breathed slowly. What happened when they made contact? The Draven transmitted one message to the human vessel, said Vathis. It was received. It was logged. We have the transcript. Another pulse, and this one felt unmistakably like the moment a door closes that cannot be reopened. Ambassador, the message contained 17 words. In 17 words, the Draven told your people exactly what would happen next. And your people. Vathis paused. Your people responded. The transcript was displayed on a flat light panel that one of the junior Velhari extended toward her. Drea read it twice. The Draven's message translated from its original pulse form. You have entered our threshold. Leave now and we will not remember you. Stay and we will. Below it, the response logged from the human survey vessel. A 3-person science team aboard the UES Marginal Star, registered out of the Europa Deep Survey Program. We're not here to cause trouble. We detected unusual stellar formations and followed a survey corridor. We mean no harm. Could we talk? Drea read it a third time. She pressed her lips together. They asked if they could talk, she said. Yes, said Vathis. And the Draven responded to that? The Draven, said Vathis, do not talk. There was a long silence. The Draven, continued the first chord, transmitted a second message. Also 17 words. They always use 17 words. No civilization has ever determined why. Some have tried to identify significance in the number. There is none that we can identify. It may simply be a pulse that carried the feeling of an ancient, unknowable habit, their way. The second message was below the first on the panel. You were warned. You chose to remain. You have chosen. We will arrive in your space at the next stellar cycle. Drea did her math. She was good at math. Agricultural logistics required it, and so did everything that had come after. A stellar cycle by their measurement, she said. That's roughly 6 weeks. 51 days, said Vathis. Counting from the date of transmission. You have 43 days remaining. And when they arrive, they will do what they have always done, said Vathis. What they did to the Kareth. To the Solon Collective. To the Vethvara. Each name landed with a pulse of grief, specific grief, the grief of personal loss, which meant the Velhari had known these civilizations. Had maybe loved some of them. They will approach your home system. They will transmit one final message. And then? 17 words, said Drea. Always. Drea set the panel down on her knees. She stared at the far wall of the chamber for a long moment. What do we know about them? She asked. The Draven. What do we actually know? The Velhari exchanged what she had learned to recognize as a significant look, the way their sensory clusters angled toward each other briefly before returning to her. We know what they have shown us, said Vathis. Their ships are unlike any propulsion architecture we have encountered. They appear to use energy in no measurable way, neither fusion nor dark fold, nor gravitational tethering. They simply move. Their vessels are organic in structure, not mechanical. Living ships. We do not know if the ships and the Draven are separate entities or one being. A long pause. We have never seen a Draven outside of a ship. We have never received more than 17 words from them at a time. We do not know what they look like, what they think, or what they want. We only know what they do. Which is to eliminate threats, said Drea. Which is to eliminate disturbances, Vathis corrected, and the distinction in the pulse was sharp and careful. That is not the same thing. The Kareths were not a threat to anyone. They were explorers. They crossed into the Draven threshold by accident, exactly as your people did. They apologized. They retreated immediately. The Draven came anyway. Why? We believe, and here Vathis paused for so long that Drea thought the translation earpiece had malfunctioned. We believe the Draven do not distinguish between intention and consequence. They do not care why you came. They care only that you came. The threshold was crossed. The disturbance was made. And now it must, the pulse, the terrible, ancient, resigned pulse, be resolved. Drea was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You said you've never spoken the Draven's name to a young civilization. Correct. But you're speaking it to me now. Yes. Because there's no point in protecting us from the world anymore. Vathis folded their wings slightly, the Velhari gesture she had learned for, You are correct and I wish you were not. Is there anything, Drea said slowly, that has ever stopped them? The chamber was hushed. No, said Vathis. Has anyone ever tried to communicate beyond the 17-word exchanges? 3 civilizations attempted extended communication. The Dravens did not respond to any message longer than their own. They only acknowledged 17 words or fewer. Drea blinked. They only engage with 17 words or fewer? This is the pattern across all recorded contacts. Yes. She looked down at the transcript again. We mean no harm. Could we talk? 6 words in that last sentence. 12 in the full response. Under 17. And the Draven had answered it. She turned that over cautiously in her mind, the way she used to turn soil samples over in her hands back in Idaho, feeling for texture, for what was underneath. I need to send a message to Earth, she said. Of course. I need all information you have on every previous Draven contact. Every transcript. Every 17-word exchange. Every record. Vathis pulsed. Surprise layered under caution, layered under something that felt, distantly, like the earliest, most fragile form of hope. Ambassador, said the first chord carefully, what are you thinking? Drea stood up from the chair. I'm thinking, she said, that nobody has ever actually talked to them. They gave her a research chamber on the station's lower tier, a small hexagonal room with a flat light table and a humidity level calibrated for Velhari comfort, which meant it was approximately as dry as the surface of Mars. She requisitioned a moisture diffuser from the station's supply office, draped her coat over the chair, and spent 16 hours reading. There were 47 recorded Draven contact events spanning 2,300 years. Every single one followed the same sequence. A civilization crossed the threshold, sometimes knowingly, sometimes by accident, sometimes because they simply did not know it existed. The Draven transmitted their first message. Leave now and we will not remember you. Stay and we will. The civilization either left, and was never contacted again, or stayed or responded or apologized or argued or pleaded. The Draven sent the second message, you were warned. You chose. We will arrive. And then they arrived. Of the civilizations that had crossed and immediately left without responding, there were 9, the Draven had indeed never followed. Leave now and we will not remember you. They honored that. Every single time. But the UES Marginal Star crew had not left. They had responded. And in responding they had, in the Draven's framework, chosen. Drea built a spreadsheet. She could not help it. She was a logistics coordinator at heart, and logistics meant finding the pattern in the movement. She cataloged every message. Every response. Every attempt at communication was made by the civilizations that had been destroyed. The Solenne Collective had sent 42 messages after the second Draven transmission. 42. Long, eloquent, philosophical treatises on the nature of accidental trespass, on the ethics of proportional response, and on the meaning of intent. None of them under 17 words. None of them acknowledged it. The Kareth had transmitted a single message, we are sorry. We did not know. Please. 8 words. Under 17. The Draven had responded, sorry does not unmake what was made. You have chosen. We will arrive at the next cycle. Drea stopped. She read it again. Sorry does not undo what was done. She had read that line 3 times in the last 16 hours without it snagging on anything. Now it did. Unmake what was made. She pulled up the original survey vessel transmission again. You have entered our threshold. Leave now and we will not remember you. Stay and we will. We will not remember you. She had assumed that meant, we will not come after you. Every analyst, every diplomat, and every species that had encountered this message had assumed the same thing. It was a threat with an exit clause. Leave and you're safe. But what if remember was the actual operative word? What if the Draven did not experience time the way other species did? She pulled up the xenobiological speculation files, sparse, mostly theoretical, that the Velhari had compiled on Draven cognition. Later scholars had largely dismissed one section, written approximately 800 years ago by a Velhari philosopher named Cord Savies, as overly abstract. Drea read it 4 times. Savies had proposed that the Draven might be indelible, that they did not simply have memories the way other creatures did. That every Draven contact event, every crossed threshold, and every disturbance was written into their perception permanently and involuntarily. That the phrase, we will not remember you, was not a promise of mercy but a description of a physiological process. If you left immediately before full contact was made, the encounter would not register. Would not stick. They would perceive you as light passing through clear water. But if you stayed, or responded, you became fixed in their perception. Permanent. Indelible. And the Draven, Savies argued, experienced an indelible disturbance as if it were a wound. Not metaphorically. Literally. Neurologically. A crossed threshold that had registered was a wound that could not heal, unless the source of the disturbance was removed. Savies had concluded, the Draven do not make war. They perform surgery. And they do not stop until the wound is closed. Drea sat back. She understood now in her bones why every attempt at apology had failed. You cannot apologize to a nervous system. You cannot reason with scar tissue. But Savies had also written one other line, almost as an aside in the final paragraph of the document, as if he had not quite believed it himself. If the above is correct, then the only being capable of closing a Draven wound is the one who opened it, not through destruction but through some form of counter-inscription. I do not know what does this mean in practice. I only know that no civilization has ever attempted it. They have all tried to make Draven forget. Perhaps, instead, one must give them something new to remember. Drea stared at that line for a long time. Then she opened a new message to Earth. The response from Earth came back in 11 hours, which meant they had taken it seriously enough to push it through the emergency diplomatic relay rather than standard channels. She had sent a detailed brief. What she got back was a committee. Director Holland Vass, United Earth Diplomatic Corps, came through on the flat light panel looking like a man who had not slept, which was accurate. It was 4 a.m. in Geneva. Solenne, he said. Walk me through this again. Slowly. I believe the Draven can be communicated with, she said. Not negotiated with. Not reasoned with. Communicated with. But it requires a specific approach. Based on one line from an 800-year-old alien philosopher. Based on 800-year-old alien philosophical speculation plus pattern analysis of every contact event on record, which I can send you the spreadsheet for if you. I have the spreadsheet. I've had 3 analysts look at it. Vass rubbed his face. They agree the pattern is real. They disagree on your interpretation. What's their interpretation? Those 17 words are a ritual boundary. That the Draven have a sacred or ceremonial relationship with the number and that crossing into their threshold literally constitutes a religious violation. That we should be looking for a ritual of atonement, not, he gestured at her notes, whatever this is. Their interpretation requires the Draven to have religion, said Drea. Mine only requires them to have neurology. Yours also requires you to contact the Draven directly. Yes. Silence. Solenne, the last civilization that attempted extended communication after a second warning, was destroyed in its entirety. They sent messages over 17 words. I won't. You want to transmit a message into Draven space. I want to transmit the right message. Specific content. Specific length. And I need one thing from Earth to do it. What? I need the crew of the marginal star. Vass stared at her. The survey team, she said. The 3 people who actually made the original contact. I need them here. I need to talk to them. And then I need at least one of them to be part of the transmission. Why? Because, said Drea, if the Draven experience disturbances as wounds, as something fixed and indelible in their perception, then the wound is not humanity. The wound is in those 3 people. They're the specific signal that registered. Any communication I send from a neutral diplomatic station won't be the same frequency. It has to come from the source of the wound or it won't land. Vass was quiet for a long time. You're describing this, he said finally, like you know how it works. I'm describing it like I have a theory, said Drea. There's a difference. And if you're wrong? She did not flinch. Then we're in exactly the same position we're already in. 43 days, Director. 21 of those days just to get the marginal star crew here. I need a decision. Vass looked at her. You were promoted, he said, because you're comfortable with ambiguity. I know. I'm beginning to think that was a mistake. Probably, she agreed. Can I have the crew? He closed his eyes. Open them. I'll authorize the transfer. Solenne, if this goes wrong. I know. She ended the call before he could finish the sentence. She already knew what came after if this went wrong. She had known since she sat down in that chair in the council chamber and read 17 words that no one had ever actually tried to understand. They arrived 19 days later, which meant she had 24 days left. Dr. Yusra Hamad, 31, astrophysicist. Quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have been debriefed 17 times and have run out of things to say. She had been the one to detect the stellar formations. She had been the one who argued for following the survey corridor into the Keth marginal zone. Tech specialist Owen Carr, 26, is a systems engineer. He had not slept properly since the incident. It showed. He kept his hands very still in his lap, the way people do when they are afraid of what their hands might do if left unsupervised. Survey Commander Bex Talley, 40, was a former deep-water cartographer before she switched to space. She walked into the research chamber, looked at Drea's wall of notes and transcript printouts and the massive annotated spreadsheet now covering most of the flat light table, and said, "You actually think you can fix this?" "I think I can try something that hasn't been tried," said Drea. "That's not the same thing." "No," Drea agreed. "It's not. Sit down." She explained everything. All of it. Savies, the wound theory, the 17-word pattern, and the counter-inscription hypothesis. She watched their faces as she talked. Yusra listened with the intense, still focus of a scientist encountering a theory she cannot immediately disprove. Owen looked like a man being handed a rope while drowning, desperately wanting to believe it would hold. Bex watched Drea the whole time, not the notes, not the transcripts. Just Drea. When Drea finished, Bex said, "You need one of us to send the message." "Yes." "Which one?" "I'd like it to be you," said Drea. "You're the commanding officer. The original transmission was logged under your authorization. If the Draven's perception is organized around a specific source signal, the being whose presence is most associated with the disturbance, it's most likely you." Bex was quiet for a moment. "And if your theory is wrong? If we transmit and they just... Then we've lost nothing we weren't already losing. We've lost 24 days we could have spent evacuating." "Where would you evacuate to?" said Drea quietly. "The Velhari won't shelter us, they've already told me. Every species at this station has made clear they will not position themselves between humanity and the Draven. Not because they don't care. Because they know it wouldn't matter." The room was very quiet. "What do you want the message to say?" asked Yusra. Drea picked up a single sheet of notes. She had been working on it for 19 days. She had written and discarded 412 versions. 17 words, she said. "Exactly. And the words matter more than anything I've ever written in my life." She handed the sheet to Bex. Bex read it. Her expression did not change, not because she felt nothing, but because what she felt was too large for her face to contain. Owen leaned over and read it too. He made a small sound low in his throat, not quite a word. Yusra read it last. She looked up at Drea. "This is either the most profound diplomatic communication ever attempted," she said, "or it's complete nonsense." "Those two things," said Drea, "are not mutually exclusive." Here is what she wrote. She would not share the full linguistic breakdown until later, until after, if there was an after. But the message read, "We came because we did not know what to expect. Now we know. That knowing, keep it. We are changed." 17 words. She had spent 19 days getting to those 17 words. The first 9 drafts had been apologies. She had discarded all of them. "I apologize for trying to erase the past. Those attempts were meant to make the wound unhappen and to convince Draven that the crossing had no significance. That was wrong. Savies had been clear. Saying sorry does not unmake what was made. So she stopped trying to unmake it. The next 60 drafts had been explanations, justifications, context. All are also wrong. Context required the Draven to care about why, and they did not care about why. They cared about what had been done to them. Then she had stopped writing entirely for 4 days and just sat with the wound theory. If the crossing was a wound, if the marginal star crew had been written into Draven's perception permanently and involuntarily, then what did a wound need? Not erasure. Not an apology. No explanation. A wound needed acknowledgement. And then, and this was the part that had taken her another week, it needed to mean something. It needed to be transformed from a pointless injury into a transaction. Something that changed both parties. "We came because we did not know." True. Acknowledge. No apology, no excuse, just the raw fact. Now we know. The threshold exists. We have learned it. This knowledge is now in us permanently and involuntarily, the mirror of the wound. They were wounded by the crossing. The humans were changed by the consequences. Both are now indelible. That knowing, keep it. That understanding was the part she had agonized over most. She was not offering a trade. She was offering a gift. Take the knowledge that we now carry. Let that be what you remember. Let the wound be not healed, not erased, but completed. A scar rather than an open cut. We are changed. The 4 hardest and most important words. She was not saying, "We are sorry." She was not saying, "She will not do it again." She was saying something that no civilization had apparently ever said to the Draven in all of recorded contact history. She was saying, "You changed us. We acknowledge that you changed us. The disturbance you experienced, it left a mark on you and it left a mark on us. We have changed since crossing your threshold. We carry the weight of what we did." It was not an apology. It was a wound answering a wound. She did not know if it would work. She knew it was the truest thing she had ever written. They sent it on the 23rd day, 1 day before her deadline. Bex sat in the transmission seat. Drea stood behind her. Owen and Yusra flanked the console. 3 Velhari observers hovered near the chamber entrance. Vathis had insisted on witnessing, though whether out of hope or the need to record the final attempt for future civilization's use, Drea could not tell. The transmission was formatted to match Draven's own signal architecture as closely as Velhari communications scientists could manage. Same pulse frequency. Same tonal encoding. The same 17-word boundary, marked in their own syntactical structure. It would take 8 hours to reach Draven's space. They did not know how long a response, if there was one, would take. Bex read the words aloud into the transmission array, slowly and clearly, and Drea listened to her words in someone else's voice and felt something she had not let herself feel throughout the entire process. Fear. Not of being wrong. Of being right but not right enough. The message landed and meant something slightly different in whatever passed for Draven's cognition. The translation carried the shape of her words but missed their interior, like a shadow that carries a person's outline but not their weight. The transmission ended. The console light shifted from green to amber, signal dispatched. Now we wait, said Bex. Now we wait, Drea agreed. Dread but. Vathis drifted forward from the doorway. Ambassador. Their pulse carried something Drea could not quite read. Not hope, not dread, but something between the two, something without a clean human word. Whatever comes, you have done something no one has done before. You tried to speak to them as though they were, a long pause, as though they were comprehensible. They have a system, said Drea. Everything with a system can be understood, eventually. The Kareth believed the same thing, said Vathis. The Kareths apologized, said Drea. I didn't. The response came in 31 hours. Drea was asleep, finally genuinely asleep for the first time in weeks, when Owen shook her awake at 2 a.m. His face in the dark was something she would not forget. She ran. The transmission console was lit. The signal had already been decoded and displayed. 17 words. She read them once. She read them again. Behind her she could hear Vathis arrive, then the others. She could hear the chamber fill with the low resonant hum of Velhari wings, the sound they made when something was happening that they had no language for yet. She did not look at anyone. She read the words a third time. Draven's response. You carry it well. The mark you made in us is now matched. We will not arrive. Remember your words also. Silence in the chamber, a specific kind of silence that Drea would spend the rest of her life trying to describe to people. Not the silence of relief. Not the silence of celebration. The silence of something very ancient deciding, for the first time in 2,000 years, to try something other than what it always did. On made a sound. Then Yusra. Then Bex stood up from the console and walked to the far wall and pressed both hands against it like she needed to feel something solid. Vathis hovered just behind Drea's shoulder. Ambassador, said the first chord. Their pulse was, she had no word for it and the earpiece did not offer one. It simply delivered warmth. Old, unexpected, slightly broken warmth. What does remember this also mean? Drea looked at the words again. It means, she said slowly, that they're writing us down too. In the 3 days that followed, Drea did not sleep much. The Velhari Council reconvened, not in emergency session this time, but in something more unusual. They convened an inquiry. They wanted to understand what had happened. Not politically, philosophically. Vathis asked her to explain her reasoning from the beginning and she did, all of it, the spreadsheet, Savi's text, the wound theory and the 412 discarded drafts. You built your approach, said Vathis, on a document that our scholars dismissed 800 years ago. Your scholars dismissed it because it had no practical application, said Drea. Because no one had ever needed to apply it. And you needed to. I had 43 days and no other options. Sometimes necessity does the archaeology. The first chord pulsed, something she had not felt from them before. Thoughtful amusement, the specific kind that carries grief inside it, the way old people laugh at things that once made them cry. We have been watching the Draven for 2 millennia. We have logged every contact event. We have had our greatest minds study the patterns. Pause. We did not see what you saw. You were looking for a way to stop them, said Drea. I was looking for a way to reach them. Different question. Why? She thought about it. Because I grew up on a farm, she said finally. We had a dog that had been abused before we got her. She bit people. Not because she was bad, because she had been hurt and every new person was a threat. Everyone who tried to handle her used force or treats or commands. My mother just, Drea paused. My mother just sat near her. Every day. Without asking anything. Until the dog understood that being near a person didn't always mean being hurt. The chamber was quiet. The Draven are not a dog, said Vathis. No, said Drea. But they carry something that got hurt a very long time ago. And everyone since has been trying to make them forget the pain instead of just acknowledging that it happened. Vathis was still there for a long moment. We would like, said the first chord carefully, To establish a formal exchange between the Velhari Council and the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Not for trade. Not for alliance. A pulse, something new, something being chosen deliberately. For learning. You approach problems in a way we have not encountered before. We believe there is value in that proximity. Drea thought about Director Vass's face when she told him she had single-handedly resolved the first Draven contact crisis in recorded history using a spreadsheet and an agricultural metaphor. She thought about the evaluation file. Unusually comfortable with ambiguity. I'll recommend it, she said. On her last night at Station Orem, Owen found her in the observation deck, a narrow ledge of transparent material that extended over the contested spiral, all that dark neutral space with its cold, indifferent stars. He stood beside her without speaking for a while. Then he said, I keep thinking it's my fault. Drea did not tell him that it was not true. She already knew he would not believe that, and she respected him too much to offer him something false. You detected something real, she said. You followed it. You responded when someone spoke to you. She paused. None of those things are wrong. 6 civilizations are dead because someone did what we did. 6 civilizations did what you did and then, she stopped. Their governments panicked. Sent fleets. Sent apologies. Sent arguments. Every response built on the assumption that the Draven was an enemy to be defeated or a judge to be satisfied. She looked at the stars. You didn't start a war. You opened a door that everyone before you tried to slam shut and then was surprised when it broke. Owen was quiet. She asked if she could talk, he said. Yusra. That was her line. Could we talk? She wrote that. I know. She feels terrible about it. She asked a question that turned out to be the right question, said Drea. 12 words. Under 17. The Draven answered it. She turned to look at him. In 2,000 years of contact events, no one else asked a question. They explained, they apologized, they argued, and they pleaded. Yusra asked. That's what cracked it open. Owen looked out at the contested spiral. Are they still out there? He asked. The Draven? Yes. Somewhere in that? Somewhere. He was quiet for a long time. Do you think they were? Do you think Savies was right? That they actually felt it? The crossing? Drea thought about the response. You carry it well. We now bear the mark you left on us. I think, she said carefully, that we spent 2,000 years being afraid of them. And they spent 2,000 years being afraid of us. She paused. I think remembering the past also might be the most important thing anyone in this galaxy has said in a very long time. She filed her report on the transit pod back to Earth. It was long. It contained the full spreadsheet, the complete Savies document, the annotated transcripts, and her 17-word breakdown. It contained her recommendation for the Velhari exchange program. It contained a detailed proposal for a standing protocol, a threshold etiquette, to be taught to every survey crew, every explorer, and every vessel that operated near the edges of mapped space. You are not alone out there. Act accordingly. She also included, in an appendix that she marked personal and non-binding, a single observation. In 47 contact events over 2,300 years, every civilization that encountered the Draven attempted to manage the encounter through power, submission, or erasure. None attempted genuine acknowledgement. I do not believe this is because those civilizations were inferior or less intelligent. I believe it is because acknowledgement, real acknowledgement, the kind that does not ask for anything in return, is extraordinarily difficult for beings with survival instincts. To say you changed us without also saying, and here is why you shouldn't have, or, and here is how we'll correct it, requires setting down the instinct to defend. It requires sitting with a wound instead of covering it. The Draven, I suspect, have been sitting with their wounds for a very long time. So, quietly has everyone else. She looked at that last line for a moment. Then she left it in. 3 years later, the Velhari transmitted a message to Earth. Not an emergency summons. Not a council session. A simple communique formatted in the standard diplomatic relay. It said, Cord Savies' document has been re-entered into the council archive. Full attribution restored. His work is now considered foundational. We thought you should know. Drea was at the time in a garden in Boise, Idaho, sitting in her mother's backyard on a folding chair. She was on leave, the first real leave she had taken since the incident. Her mother was inside making coffee. The dog, a new one, young, still a little uncertain about strangers, was lying in the grass 3 feet away watching her. Drea read the message twice. She thought about a philosopher who had written something true 800 years ago and had been dismissed. and whose name had sat in a footnote until a logistics coordinator from Idaho needed it badly enough to dig for it. She thought about 17 words. She thought about the Draven, somewhere out in the deep dark, carrying a mark they had not asked for, and apparently doing the same for her. She thought about her mother's dog. The old one. The way it had finally rested its head in her mother's lap after 3 months of patient proximity. It did not forget what it had been through. Not erasing it. Just choosing one day to let a person be near. The young dog in the grass had moved closer while she was reading. It was now 18 inches from her boot. It was watching her with the careful, measuring attention of a creature deciding whether nearness was worth the risk. Drea did not reach toward it. She sat still. She waited. After a long while, the dog put its head down on her foot. She sent the Velharia reply. "Thank you. Please tell us more about him. We would like to know." 14 words.